Well, I definitely feel like I just took a journey. And as I said before, that is one of the standout tracks for me. A lot of sonic goodness happening there. And one reason I like doing the podcast is people can just hear music and draw their own conclusions. But when the artists themselves explain, different things, why they call it this, why this and that happened, it just allows us to experience it on another level. So the next three tracks feature all the sort of one-off guests. The first one is the country jam that Sean brought up, Eat a Frog. That features the fiddle ninja, Janae Fleenor. And you also mentioned the drumming on that, the title being a reference to it. I mean, just listening to that drum pattern makes my arms tired. Sounds
a lot of notes.
Sounds pretty demanding. And, if you're being paid by the syllable, maybe you could have called it consume an amphibian. But doesn't have the same pop as Eat a Frog. So how do you know Janae, the fiddle player on that track?
Well, let me address one thing really quickly, which is that the track Eat a Frog is very representative, even though it's been referenced as like, oh, there's a country song. That's peculiar. But the fact that there is a country song is very indicative of the fact that we didn't really put any parameters on what we were going to do. And so literally the genesis of that tune was me looking at Sean and going, oh, yeah, well, what if I do this? And starting to play a train groove and then seeing what he would do. So that was kind of how that song came about and why, even though it may be an outlier for the tracks, why really it is very representative of exactly what the record is in certain respects. In terms of Janae, I know Janae because I play on this show called The Voice, and one of our coaches is the Blake Shelton. And Janae is in Blake's band, and frequently she will appear on the show with Blake's band, or when we're doing country compositions on the show, sometimes we have the pleasure of having her come out. And so I asked, and she very graciously contributed to the project and played some excellent fiddle.
Yeah, she's a shredder. She's sickening. And she's the one that actually says ribbit at the end.
Yeah. And I'm sure she was like, hey, Nate, if you ever want to work with Sean Halley and do a song about a frog, I'm your girl.
Pretty much.
That makes sense. I'm sure it happened exactly that way. The next track after that one, again, flips it around. It's more of a straightforward and traditional jazz composition and arrangement. Nate even dusted off his brushes for that one. Bob Reynolds on saxophone. That one's called Sad People Music. So a lot to unpack there, including the title, how you know Bob, and by brushes I mean toothbrushes. We'll make sure that's
yeah, hairbrushes.
Real challenge to get those toothbrushes to register on the kit.
The first time I ever saw a set of brushes, the very first drum set that I ever got, when I would have been 5 years old or so,
right.
And it came with a pair of sticks and it came with a pair of brushes, and I literally looked at the brushes and did not know what they were, and at the time thought that they were some sort of variation on like an Afro pick.
Not bad, or a way to clean the cymbals.
Something I didn't know. I had no idea. I had no idea that they were actually something that you played the drums with.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad.
I still barely have an idea that there's something that you play the drums with.
I get that because my son plays the flute now in the school band. He's been doing it a couple of years, and it does come with a little rod that you stick in there to clean the flute.
And they're called brushes. You totally brush away the dust. You brush away lint or something. I didn't know. I was 5.
So Bob Reynolds is the sax player.
Sean getting us back on course. Way to go, buddy. Do it. Grab those reins, son.
So Bob Reynolds is the sax player for Snarky Puppy, and he's the guy that you hear anytime they need a long, actual real badass sax guy. That's Bob. He is a sick boy. And Nate played with him on the Bunny Hunt show. I think that's how you know him, right? Originally?
Yeah, I think that's maybe the first time that Bob and I worked together.
So Nate played brushes, which he doesn't think he's good at, but he sounded great. Bob Reynolds played sax, and he's sick. He basically walked into the house and played 2 solos. That's the second one, or the first one, actually. And then I just tried to make it sound not stupid for the rest of the parts.
Well, I have to say, of all the album, that's one of the best recorded tracks. This just sounds really good. So I commend you for that. And Snarky Puppy is turning into a pretty good resource because Don Breidup had a guitar player do a guest solo on his, and Lucy Woodward has been on the show before, and Mike League was the bass player in her band before he started Snarky Puppy. So they come up from time to time, and those guys are all just amazing players. And it's nice to see people coming up behind us that are really, mastering the instrument. So it's going to be music has a future.
Yeah, Mark Lettieri, who's one of the guitar players for Snarky, is a guy I know, and I went to see them play at the Orpheum here in town a few months ago, and it was wonderful to just see instrumental improvisational music that's challenging, but the theater was full, and it was full of young people, and everyone loved it, and it sounded amazing, and obviously their new compositions are just wonderful. It was just cool. It was really like, yeah, cool. All right, this is going to keep going. This is going to, this is still making itself known to a younger generation that has all sorts of options to stuff they could do and listen to and be, anywhere tonight. And yet they chose to be here, which is pretty cool. I'm really proud of those guys. I think it's great.
And he's the exact guitar player who played on Don's album, Mark Lettieri. So
yeah, Mark's a great guy. He's a sweetie.
Yeah.
Good dude.
And it was also sort of from that John Harrington school. I mean, by which I mean somebody who sort of can play rock and jazz like in the same 8 bars, So
and he's a funky dude too.
Yeah.
Mark is funky.
But is he sad? Because this song is called Sad People Music. What an awkward segue back to the...
It's actually supposed to be sad bastard music, but I didn't want to offend anyone that actually saw the cover. So
well,
it's actually,
I'll tell you something honestly. When I prepared my outline, I did a typo when I wrote Bad People Music.
That's far more interesting. That's actually a cop show kind of a thing.
And then when I read it, I said that can't be right. I got the CD back out and go, oh, sad people. Okay. So was the intent of the track to provide relief and comfort to sad people, or just to rub it in? Yes, sad people, sucks to be you.
I think it's just sort of it's so, it's quite a slow tempo. It does, as with anything Nate and I do, it does build to some sort of a crescendo in various places and get loud. But in general, it's a much softer, slower sort of a thing. And introspective. So it felt like,
reflective.
Yeah, reflective. All of those words. So it just felt like, now you're playing the sad bastard music. Okay, here you go.
Okay, well, I mentioned Homer's Journey was the second longest track. At 8:56, Sad People Music is the longest track, but you mentioned the slower tempo, and that's the reason.
Yeah.
Well, the final guest on the album is the guitarist Oz Noy, and his name has come up on the show from time to time, particularly on our Steve Adelson and Mike Jacobs episodes. So Sean also plays guitar on the track, and then Oz is credited with the dream sequence and the middle guitar solo. That one starts out with a sort of Jeff Beck blow-by-blow vibe, and then 2 minutes in, it takes a hard turn, and then segues into the Oz Noy content eventually, and then ultimately returns to the opening theme. So I've compared you to the Beatles and Chet Atkins, and I got Jeff Beck in there too, and John Harrington. So,
that's pretty nice company. Jeff Beck was the first guitar player I tried to learn anything from. So him and David Gilmour. So that's awesome.
Dave Gilmour, big for me in terms of not wasting any notes, and just
totally.
Really, and then Jeff Beck in terms of making the guitar sound like a human voice. So the name of that one is The Phlebotomist, which makes me think of both phlegm and lobotomies.
Or Drawing Blood, which is
close.
Drawing Blood, which was sort of like, Nate's put out various other records over the years and been the name on the record for many times. But for me, this is the first one that my name was going to be on. And seeing as how it came out at this stage in my life, it always felt like, doing a record's like pulling blood, in Drawing Blood. But it's not. Actually, this was the easiest record in the world to actually record. Just not the easiest to mix, but to record, it was the easiest thing ever. But this tune is actually a really fun example for me of how it's very easy to be myopic about something. Mm-hmm. Like I had something in the middle section that I just sort of played a univibey, Hendrixy kind of thing and then built it into the solo section. But I just sent Oz the track with a click and just said, all right, here, do something. And he's like, oh, wow, that's really challenging. And I said, do whatever you want. And he came up with this Wayne's World dream sequence with a, And I just think it's great because it's totally not what I would have done, and it wasn't something that I would have thought about in that way. And it was it was a wonderful lesson on the fact that there are benefits to doing things yourself sometimes because it's consistent and you have the same pocket. And my bass playing is always going to line up with my guitar playing, but it's pretty cool to get somebody else's idea about what could happen in a certain place. It was pretty cool.
So let's move on to the last track on the album. We spoke about it a little bit. Nate starts soloing about 3 minutes in, and Nate has a unique approach sometimes to soloing, which he's explained. And then, it just sort of goes off the rails at the end, and you guys just kind of left that in. It's like, all right, well, that's a wrap for the album, which is kind of choked, and, let's finish on that note. So before we get to that part, why did you title it 2 steps back? Isn't that 10 steps forward or 4 steps sideways? I mean, why is it 2 steps back?
I actually don't know.
Perfect.
Did it have an original title and I gave you a hard time about it?
I think the original title was the 2-step, and I think it's because the original riff I had for that song was like this.
I wish you could see Sean dancing right now. Yeah. Sean is literally dancing.
Yeah. And so I think that because I think it just made me think of the 2-step, and so when it didn't become, when I re-recorded the song, that was underneath the foundation.
Back. It's like, this is not what I was aiming for.
Exactly.
And then the end, I mean, if I may, sometimes just things happen goofy, and you just decide, like, you know what, let's just leave that.
I just think we have such a good time, as you can tell. I mean, we have such a good time when we're hanging out, and it's like the end of Eat a Frog. You can sort of hear. I turned the tom mics up really loud at the very end, just so you can hear the fact that everyone in the studio is yelling. Because it's just, we have a good time, and Nate is one of my favorite people on the planet, and he makes me laugh like nobody else does. And so anytime I can let other people in the world in on that sort of hilarious little bond we have, the better.
And there's also an extent to where, because you're in a studio, you spend a lot of time aiming for what I would say, quote unquote, perfection. You spend a lot of time aiming for the take, but also too, it's sometimes fun to just, that was kind of goofy, but we'll just leave it. It was like just one of those moments.
A human moment.
Yeah,
exactly.
This whole record for me has been about catharsis in the sense that I have thousands of tunes in the can, thousands, and I've never released a record because I've just always been worried about stuff not being good enough. And so in a way, I knew that this project was going to be one of those things where, all right, my name's on it, so I'm going to have to emotionally get over the fact that it's officially released and people can go buy it. Because once people can buy stuff, they can also rip it apart, right?
Sean and I both have a tendency to be too precious with things.
Yeah.
We have a tendency to start with an idea, create something, but then mold it and reshape it and remold it and rewrite it and redo it to the point where either it doesn't happen or it just becomes this overwhelming thing. And again, the end result being it doesn't happen. And so I think that we both sort of made a vow with each other to not be too precious with it. Like, for example, earlier when you were talking about mixing, and I thought of the old adage, when is a mix done?
Yeah, when you
stop, And because we both adopted, the attitude of let's not be too precious with this. Like Sean, and I say this with all due respect because he's like my boy and I love him dearly. Sean could still be mixing this record right now.
Totally.
But at a certain point, it was like, dude, it sounds amazing. I swear it sounds amazing. We have to let it go. There are, if I may be so bold, I'm speaking for myself, not Sean, because his playing is flawless, but there are mistakes. I made mistakes on the record, but I kind of went like, you know what? The vibe is cool. It should just, it'll just stay like that. That's all good.
I did the same.
And so I think a little bit of that is just allowing a project like this to have some breadth and some humanity, if you will.
Yeah, I think the Pop and Fresh Dough thing you played at the beginning of the program is a really good example of how things have changed for me. For instance, I recorded like 6 solos that day for that tune just to have options, and I ended up going with the first version, even though there were probably cleaner bits in the second and third and fourth version, and maybe the harmonic stuff was more interesting or whatever. But I just thought, no, this first one's fine, and I think that's a real change because that would have never happened before releasing this.
How much do you find, Sean, that the more you redo and redo and redo, especially like a solo, for example, maybe you'll get closer to what you're aiming for in terms of perfection, but with every redo, the 10th time, the 12th time, the 15th time, maybe a little bit less actual juice is still flowing in the thing anymore.
Yeah, that Gantt chart that somebody has about the number of takes that you should take.
I haven't seen this.
Yeah, it's like it's a sliding scale, and it's like the first take is killer groove with some mistakes. Second take is not bad groove, like a good groove, getting closer. Third take, no mistakes, but lifeless, that kind of thing. And it's absolutely true.
Yeah,
absolutely true. So I think for me, releasing the record and actually saying it's for sale, it's released, you can judge me now, and there's nothing I can say against that, has been a real cathartic thing for me. Like, it has been a really amazing thing. I know that we'll be able to record and make records way faster now because I'm way less precious about it.
Isn't this recording Grammy nominated?
It is in the first round of voting, so it is in the first group at the moment. So we are excited. I don't think we would have expected it even to be into the voting, just even to go to members. So we're pretty excited about the fact that it made even that first cut. So it's certainly not Grammy nominated yet, but It's pretty amazing. We're really happy about that part.
And for a first release of your original stuff, that's got to make you feel pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's somebody, the first group of tunes are vetted by some 350 industry professionals, and they listen to them all and make sure that they're good enough to go on and be voted on by the body. So somebody listened to it and said, yeah, this is good enough to go up against some other person that's legit. So that's pretty cool.
Well, I want to encourage everybody to check out the official website, fraudprophets.com. Now, there is a gig tab on the site that sort of implies this might be more than just a studio creation. So are you guys going to put a band together for some live shows?
We have actually been jamming with the bass player friend of ours, and we're sort of trying to figure out methodology. The hard thing is when you get used to listening to these things and they're full of all these extra guitar tracks and keyboard tracks, it can be a little disconcerting to hear them with just three dudes. It's like, wow, this sounds empty. So we're going to have to add a keyboard player soon. But we are in the process of beginning to learn the songs ourselves. That's neat. Hey, how the hell did that go? And then, bass player's Ben White, and we're going to be getting ready for
We're
gigs.
trending towards doing a gig.
We're trending towards gigs.
Trending towards gigs.
Yes. So that's the plan. The plan is to do some gigs in town. We just don't exactly know what a timeline is yet.
Well,
And it's like with everything, Dan,
Yeah.
in the sense that, Ben is a professional working musician. He's in and out of town because he's in demand. Sean, same thing. I have my day gig that I do. So we're, it's just a matter of finding the time to make it happen. But it will happen.
It will happen. We want to do it. It would be fun. It'll be a fun show.
Well, we mentioned at the beginning you guys are both LA based, and we didn't mention, but people may have figured out, you guys are actually in the same room, which is a little bit different for me to have two guests in the same spot. Listeners know I'm in Arizona. The Southwest is not that far from Southern Cal, so when you're putting that tour together, there's a lot of music fans here in the Valley.
Totally. We will totally do that.
And I appreciate you putting that out there in the atmosphere, Dan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So the last song we're going to hear is the penultimate track, which is just a fancy way of saying next to last. This one also has that Hendrixy yet jazzy vibe that Sean is so good at. It's a little mellower, but in the Joe Satriani sense of mellow. I mean, still pretty ballsy. So the title of this one is The Climb, and what are we climbing?
It just felt like it kind of does that musically. It sort of feels like this was the one tune where we were sort of like, oh, we should not think in four for a second. We should think in something else. And so Nate started playing something that was more five-ish. And when it came time for the second phrase, I actually ended up switching it to six for no reason. But you don't really notice that. You're not really noticing that there's a bunch of odd time stuff. You just sort of feels like it flows from one section to the next. And it's quite funny. When I sent this record to my friend Paul Heinmarsh, who's an English guitar player from Newcastle, buddy of mine, he actually said, and other people have said this, finally found a place to put that influence you got from the Top Gun theme, huh? It's like, yep, absolutely right. Yeah, the Top Gun theme was played by Steve Stevens, Billy Idol guitar player, great guitar player. Yeah. And there's something very poppy and studio-y about it. And when you hear that tune, it does have a bit of the Top Gun theme. But anyway, no, I thought it musically, it's a very American sounding song in a way, because it has that, 1 to major 3 to 4 kind of climb thing to it. And it just felt like that's kind of what happens on it. It's the only solo on the entire record where I used a different microphone on the cabinet, which is pretty funny. Every other
nerd.
I know. Every other sound on the entire record is the exact same
microphone reference on the cabinet. Yeah, I'm sure that everybody listening is going to go like, this sounds a little different. This sounds like a different mic on the cabinet.
I'm a dork. What can I say?
Dan, our friendship is equal parts support and harassment.
Pretty much.
Those are the best ones. Well, Nate, I want to thank you for returning to the show yet again. Third time's a charm, I guess. It's always a pleasure to have you here, and I look forward to you coming back a fourth time. So thanks for being here, my friend.
Dan, I am always appreciative of you having me on. It's always a good time, and thank you. And sure, man, I'm happy to come back anytime you want.
And Sean, it was great to have you here as well. You're in the family now, so you can come back anytime you want.
Thank you very much. It's very, this is all a new experience for me, speaking as an artist or something, as opposed to just some sort of supporting dude. I don't take it for granted. I'm really grateful for it. Thanks, man.
I want to remind everyone about the website, fraudprophets.com. They've also got a band page up on Facebook, so please connect with them there. And if you've enjoyed the tracks we played on the show today, I strongly recommend buying the entire album and checking out the ones we didn't play. which are equally compelling. So once again, I'd like to thank Nate Morton and Sean Halley. Thank you for listening. And now, as promised, here comes track 9 from Poptosis by Fraudprophets. This is The Climb. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Oh, you guys will get a kick out of this. Check it out. If you would have answered, no, I'm saying Sean, if you would have answered differently about how many guitars do you have, I was ready with this. Well, there's my 335. I got 7 Les Pauls. Let's see, 3 Telecasters. I have to let it play out now.
Yeah, because you didn't.
You have
save
to.
that. You can
You
save
have to play that.
Oh yeah. Okay.
You have to play you doing this while after. Even though I didn't require that much time, you have to do it. That's fantastic.
Well, my thought was I was going to say, how many guitars do you own? And instead of saying 33 like you did, you were going to say, oh, wow, I have to think about that. And I go, well, let me give you 30 seconds, and then I could have played that. But no, you ended up creating a third category of guy who owns 1 million guitars and knows the number.
Ribbit.